4, 3, 2, 1. So I'd like to go ahead and call this meeting to order. I would do a land recognition, but the site that I use is giving me a strange result, so we'll have to pick that up next month. Apologies for that. Ceremonial quote is you're still on mute. And we can go ahead and start the roll call. So I'm going to count, I'm going to go from how I see everybody. If people change, I may have to move it around. Kelly Lynch McMahon.
Here.
Thank you. William Rojek.
Here.
Thank you. Brian Gebhardt.
Here.
Thank you. Trustee Jones.
Here.
Thank you. Lisa Sanguinas.
Here.
And feel free to correct my pronunciation at any time. Judy Nye.
Here.
Great. Liz Fisher.
Here.
Thank you. Sharon Coco.
Here.
Thank you. Brian Kilgore.
Here.
Thank you. Michelle Hartman Gruber.
Here.
Eric Chu.
Here.
Thank you. Skipping over Luis. Henry Fung.
Here.
Thank you. Connie.
Here.
Malia Santos.
Here.
Thank you. And Connie, can you remind me, are you a member of staff or on the committee?
She's a member of staff. She's a Banner employee.
Oh, got it. Thank you. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so I count 9 committee members, so we're more than fine on quorum. So now we can go ahead and approve the minutes 13/2020. First, I'll ask if anybody has any comments. If not, first, I'll do this by objections, but I also need to test that people can vote. So I'm going to ask you to all object in a minute. And actually, we'll just do it by vote. Okay. And to adopt the minutes as shown in Exhibit A.
I'll move.
Thank you, Sharon. And do I have a second?
I'll second.
All right, thanks, Brian. Okay, so everybody does have their hands down. If you could go to the pop that open, and then if you see the option for raise hand, that's how we're going to vote. If you have any issues doing that, if you could turn your video on and raise your physical, not yet because I haven't called for it. So please put your hands down. All right. So all in favor of adopting the minutes as stated in Exhibit A, please raise your hand. Okay, and I have to using your physical hand and virtual hand, but it's not a problem unless we get it to a close vote. So, all right, please put your hands down. All opposed? And that was just a test to make sure that everybody knew how to vote. Now moving on to oral and written communications. So I'll go ahead and look to see if there are any.
We did not receive any that I'm aware of. Brian, did we receive any?
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, and just 1 second, because someone's having an issue with joining. Committee members having trouble joining. Can a member of staff help?
Let's see.
To be able to join so I can continue the meeting? I'm going to forward it to you, Kelly.
Okay.
Okay, and if my audio keeps cutting in and out, I may just have to change rooms while we get the staff's update. But for now, I'm just going to stop my video in hopes that helps.
Let's see.
Okay. Actually, Kelly, since I'm going to be, yeah, I will do so. Kelly, since I'm going to staff update, I can go ahead and try to get Cicely in since it'll go to
Okay.
you.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure what's going on, but maybe if you just send her the link again, that might, do the trick. We've been having some issues on our side of the table with our Zoom and our Google over the last couple days. So I'll report this to IT as well, because it's been happening all day and all day yesterday too. So I apologize for that. Let's see. So as far as staff updates go, there's been quite a bit of activity since the first of the year for the facilities group. We have been working very closely with the superintendent's office to host a series of Measure E update meetings for the community. And so we have completed 3 out of 5 of those updates over the last 2 weeks. And so we have presented information to the Kennedy attendance area, Washington High School attendance area, and the Irvington High School attendance area. And on February 8th and 9th, we will host the Mission San Jose and the American High School attendance areas. And so these are 1-hour forums. We present all of the scope of work that's been completed to date for the Measure E program, as well as the future projects that are coming. And we give a very high level overview of the current budget and funds that have been expended to date, as well as funds that will, as well as projects that have been unfunded due to consolidation of the projects and modernization of the middle schools. We've been fortunate to have some really amazing videos of the new structures that have been built within Fremont. So at some point, if you all have time, please attend one of the meetings in your attendance area. But also this information will be available on the district's website within the Measure E program, as well as in the facilities department's links. So if you didn't get a chance to attend them, you can actually watch them because they are recorded and they are streamed when they're done. But lots of good feedback from the community. Lots of good questions have been asked. We are also creating a document of all the questions that have been raised by the community members. That'll kind of be like a frequently asked questions kind of sheet. And we'll have that available for folks to refer to, as well as download on the website at the conclusion of these community forums. Let's see, what else is going on? We have not, knock on wood, had any work stoppages on any of the programs that are under construction right now over the last 2 weeks. So I'm standing with bated breath and crossing my fingers that we don't, have any issues. But so far so good. We have been very successful in having very responsible contractors who have been very creative in some of the solutions at the sites when we come across some challenges. And so that work is going on very well. The other thing that has been very helpful and has started is the move coordination with the site staff for all of the middle schools. Cordoba Corporation, we hired them in November, and they are now working directly with the sites to work with the principals and their, I guess the sites have now developed their own move management teams. So, and that would be like a lead teacher or a lead administrator to help coordinate and identify sort of key issues or hot topics that teachers need to address. And so they are now doing those coordination plans and putting together a comprehensive approach so that those schools will be transitioned from their existing housing into their temporary housing over the spring break. So those conversations with the teachers and the site staff have been going very well, and I've gotten positive feedback that they're very happy and not as stressed about the move. So we're really excited and happy about that. The other thing that's going on is that Lila Bringhurst, I think the last meeting I shared with you guys that we actually took possession of Lila Bringhurst. Well, we are finally almost across the finish line. I believe that the superintendent and legal counsel will be meeting with the city and the developers, I believe, over the next week or two to actually kind of finalize and like get everything all done so that we have everything in order for us to have Lila Bringhurst available as part of our inventory for our facilities for our students. So really excited about that. Let's see, the other thing is, so Rick Sklangler is getting ready to, we've submitted and had many conversations with the city in terms of what our requirements are for construction permits, things like that. We're really close to getting those documents finalized and final approval, and we're preparing for bidding and solicitation of vendors to begin construction on that site within the next 60 days. So we're very excited about that. And Eric Chu's been working very hard to coordinate that with the design team. So we'll keep you guys posted on that. And we recently did achieve a, was it Sklangler? No, that's coming to board. We achieved a milestone in that the city remove some of the very stringent requirements they initially were requiring us to do surrounding some of the items on campus that now are no longer required, which allowed us not to have a significant financial impact to the project. But some of the things we still have to do, but we're ironing out what those items will be, and we'll be presenting that information for discussion to the board, not this board meeting, but on February 24th. Let me think, what else? I don't know, that's just, we've got a lot going on, but I hope that's enough for you guys at this point to chew on. Please feel free to ask me any questions, or if there's any other comments that you guys may have with the information I've shared, please let me know.
Okay, thank you. So I understand that there might be issues with my audio. I tried fixing the router to move. Is anyone hearing me clip?
You're kind of spotty and you kind of freeze
okay.
a little bit sometimes.
Let me go to, I might just try to log in from my phone. Could you give an update about the outreach that we did to the city? Because I know that was agendized. That was going to be agendized for this meeting, but.
Oh, thank you for reminding me, Antonio. I apologize for forgetting that. So I did reach out to the city of Fremont to get more information about their 10-year master plan and the residential developments that they're planning. And in particular, the reference of the, I believe it was 10 to 14,000 residential units that are planned in that master plan. I initially did not get an immediate response, but I have since talked to their planner and also the planner who actually is working on the project. And they originally were planning on coming to share information with you all, but unfortunately he reached out to me last Friday and let me know that he was ill, and he's actually on I guess quarantine for the next couple of weeks. So and this is just my opinion, he did not give me validation, but I'm assuming it's probably a COVID related exposure, since it's exactly 2 weeks time that he has to be sort of away from the office and sort of quarantine. So he said that when he is back in the office, he would be more than happy to come and share information with us in March at our next meeting. And if there are any specific questions that you guys have ahead of time, to please provide them to me, and he'll be more than happy to come prepared to answer any questions that you guys may have with regard to the development that's identified in the city's master plan. The other thing that did occur since the last time we've met is that the district did receive an updated demographic study. And so unfortunately, I forgot to share that with you guys today because the board did receive that information, not the last board meeting, but the meeting before that. And so now I have the ability to share that information with you all and to, kind of digest that and understand the implications of the demographic study as it relates to the impact to the school district and future enrollment. So the other thing that I did talk to the city of Fremont about was the negative impact of the demographic study and how that may actually affect their ability to develop, or if there's an inverse relationship of one versus the other. And what they shared with me is that their calculations are a very high level estimate, but of course, until the developments are completed and they actually have kind of bodies in houses and houses sold, they don't really have a calculator or a metric to say, this development is going to impact the school district in this particular way. So they just look at they said there's an algorithm that they use, and they just kind of plug in numbers and it kind of kicks out high level estimates for them. And so they do not anticipate their development having an impact, either positive or negative, on our future enrollment for our schools based on our latest demographic study. So, but as I said, they'll be very happy to come and speak to us and share additional information and things like that at our next meeting when they're available to speak to that. But that was my update for the city of Fremont.
Brian?
Thank you for the thorough update there. I think it really helps. A few thoughts come to mind. Well, if I understood you saying correctly, that the city has a formula they use when assessing school impacts of development, right?
Mhm.
And so that would be good when they come in March
Okay.
to hear how they look at that. I'm
Yeah.
curious how it compares to the student generation rate from our demographics report. And then the other thought I have is maybe to set expectations, but I think we'll need a kind of an overview of the basics of what what the RHNA is, if I got the acronym right, and how that all works. So I imagine many of I know I would need it, and I imagine many of us in the committee would need to start with the basics, so to even know what questions to ask.
Well, I definitely did have a learning curve myself because a lot of the acronyms I was unfamiliar with, and it's like, hey, you guys explain to me what this means. So it definitely is a lot. It's definitely a lot. So I'll be more than happy to get as much information, as we can for you all.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Henry?
Okay, thanks. I heard that I know the ventilation, classroom ventilation is supposed to be a topic we'll discuss next time, but I thought we were supposed to hear like an update at the last board meeting. I didn't hear it. I was just wondering if I missed it, or is it supposed to be on a different board meeting that the board members will hear an update on classroom ventilations?
I believe, Henry, that they're planning on doing some type of update for you all at this next board meeting. I believe the superintendent has included that as part of his reopening plan. And if there are any specific questions you have, I'd be more than happy to pass it on to Mr. Kevin Arthur, because he is heading up that effort. And he and his team have been working very diligently to address whatever issues are out there. But it's my understanding that there will be some type of formal notification and presentation given to the board at this next board meeting. And I do know that we do provide updates to the board on a regular basis, but I don't think that the public is necessarily privy to that information that we provide on a Friday. So, but that is my understanding.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Mhm.
I look forward to that. I know that there was some back and forth at the Kennedy attendance area town hall on facilities about that topic, but nevertheless, I would look forward to it being discussed at a more public setting. Luisa?
Yes, along that same line, when you say the next board meeting, do you mean the 24th of February or sooner?
No, I believe it's going to be on February 10th.
Okay. The Irvington students, PTSA did a presentation, invited a chemistry professor from, I believe, Foothill College to give a really good presentation on vaccination, on the Pfizer vaccine. It was really good. And at the end, there was a Q&A, and one of the things he covered, it was the 3 fundamental pillars for reopening schools.
Mhm.
And one of them was ventilation, and he kind of went quickly, but he offered a formula on how to calculate exactly the air exchange volumes with the capacity of the people in the classroom. And so he just kind of went through the calculation. It was recorded, this presentation. The second thing was vaccination of the teachers, and the third thing was having a testing program. So I suggested that this be shared with the board members so that they can have access to this presentation. But I just wanted to share that he seems to be very knowledgeable, and he provided that information.
I would love to get whatever information that you have. I actually am interested in that stuff as well. So I would love to get whatever information you'd be willing to share. And I will definitely pass it on to my peers as well as my administrators. To
Yeah.
also bring forward.
So I'll
So
send you the link when I get a hold of that link of that recording.
Okay, that would be much appreciated. The other thing that I was going to share with you all is that I believe that in the superintendent's updates that he sends out, I believe on a bi-weekly basis, I know that he will be speaking to, I guess, whatever steps the district is taking with regard to vaccinations and whatever decisions have been made with regard to that. I believe that he will mention it in his update and information that he provides to the community. I unfortunately don't have any information to share with you all at this point. I'm kind of at the same, not at the mercy of you all, but I get information as it is trickled out as well. So at this point, I or Brian or Eric, we just don't have any additional information to share with you guys with regard to the reopening plan and those 3 things that you just talked about.
Trustee Jones?
Oh, we can't hear you.
You're on mute.
Alameda County today sent out an email, a notification about vaccines. So everybody should take a look for that. And I know the superintendent is working with ACOE to determine exactly what that means for us and how we are going to proceed with vaccinating our staff. But I think it's on the Alameda County website and has been posted on Facebook, the letter today. So take a look for that.
And moving forward, I'll just remind us and it's because I didn't intervene earlier, but we need to make sure that we maintain the scope of whatever item we're discussing. So while ventilation was, I believe, within the staff update, other topics would not be. But to the extent they fall within the scope of facilities, it's definitely something that we would want to discuss add thoughts on future meeting topics. And one quick other note, based on the board retreats advice, I would advise us to not use the chat. Unfortunately, I'm not host, so I can't turn it off. But at most, only ask process-based questions, no substance at all in the chat. Thank you. So we can go ahead and move to the long-range facilities plan demographics subcommittee preview. This is a very short discussion. First, I'll kind of remind everybody what it is. It's one of the more action-based subcommittees. I think typically, you know, we take a look at any new demographics numbers and we input those into essentially a rubric that we created to solve for or to try to tackle the overloading problem we have in the district, where some elementary schools have many more people in their residence area than can attend. And as a result, students in that attendance area are overloaded to either neighboring schools or even schools in another attendance area. So, you know, over the past, this is something that the board has specifically asked us to tackle. We put a pause on the project with the start of the pandemic, and then we waited for the new demographics numbers, which we have as of, you know, apologies, as of the last board meeting or so. So one thing is, just to remind everybody here, the current members, Brian, do you want to refresh my memory? I thought it was you, me, is it Henry and Liz, or is that another subcommittee?
I believe it's you, me, Liz, and Henry. I couldn't remember if you were still able to join or not.
Yeah, I can still join.
And as long as we do not, you know, have subcommittees that are larger or that are as large as a quorum or a majority of this committee, we're fine. So we can certainly take on more volunteers. Is anybody interested in joining this subcommittee? And we can revisit this after I pass it off to Brian as to, you know, just, we wanted to give you a preview of things that we wanted to look at over this next month and following before bringing it back to the committee for either further direction or adoption, things of that nature. So Brian.
Thank you, Antonio. So yeah, the preview is very, very brief. I think with the upgraded demographics report over the next month in the subcommittee, we want to, you know, look at that data and help frame the data for the bigger committee, so that we can have a more fruitful conversation next month, and perhaps identify some questions about the data or some observations about the data as well. And I think also based on where we go with the long range facilities master plan update and other topics, you know, those might be other aspects that this subcommittee could be helpful in you know, preparing information for the larger committee so that is kind of some of the thoughts I have, and other subcommittee members may have things to add to that as well. But I guess to sum it all up, the overall intent is to help the larger committee more quickly analyze and understand all this information that's going to be coming at us. And I think the original intention also was to develop recommendations, which we brought forward with the rubric for the greater committee to consider as well. And so I think we'll want direction from the greater committee as we start to talk about the long range facilities plan and other future topics. But immediately it's around digging into those demographics and helping bring forward those insights for everyone.
But I realize it might be best to kind of drill it down into very basics. You know, we're a committee of the Board of Trustees. There are elected officials. We advise, you know, the board. A subcommittee is effectively like, you know, a smaller body that advises us, but we make the ultimate determination as to whether to adopt that subcommittee's recommendation, which we would then potentially push forward to the board, right? So it's, kind of think of it in layers, what this subcommittee does. Liz?
So just as a historical perspective, because as you mentioned, we worked on this some time ago and kind of tabled it for a period. But we've looked at boundaries, in assessing enrollment at the various schools. And since then, we also now have the Mandarin Immersion Program and the Spanish Immersion Program committee that are, preparing some recommendations for the Board of Education. Obviously, the continual support or pursuit of a consolidated program does also have some impacts in certain schools that currently carry that program. While overloading is also a concern, I think we have some schools that might run a larger deficit of students with certain changes that might be coming to light. And we may want to also, analyze those things.
Yeah, and to be clear, the main project that we've been tasked with by the board is overloading, but then we somewhat understood that issue to be the efficient allocation of students, like with respect to our facilities, which would encapsulate overloading and also the issue that you've addressed. But either way, this is just a preview that you should expect to see something from the subcommittee in the next few months, if not next meeting. And if you're interested in serving, email me. If you don't want to do it here. All right, we can proceed forward to the long range facilities master plan process. This can be opened up to a wider discussion, but first I wanted to get any kind of status update from Ms. McMahon as to where we are. And please do feel free to kind of, contextualize this out a few months. I know we picked advisors. I know the last time we spoke about this, you couldn't give us too many details, but feel free to speak as of a few months ago as well.
So this is a great timing because we just had a really productive meeting with the Long Range Facilities Master Plan team today. We have been working with them since the first of the year to gather data on the existing sites, and they are in the process of scheduling interviews and basically scheduling times to go out to interview the site principals and actually physically look at all of the sites over the next 6 to 8 weeks. So we are working with our maintenance and operations department as well as facilities to help them coordinate that effort at the site level. The other thing that happened today is that we reviewed their full scope of work in detail and actually began to prioritize and compartmentalize specific activities that they need to kind of complete on their side of the house before we begin to have engagement from our stakeholders in the process. So one of the things that they're working on this week is development of 3 specific surveys. They're going to have a survey for staff. They're going to have a survey for the site and their site administrative teams. And then there's also a survey that's going to be distributed to the community. And so the questions are relatively going to be the same, but they're asking, we are structuring the questions in such a way that they'll have an ability for you to rank your opinion, like a 0 to 5 or a 1 to 10 and you choose a number, so that when we compile the data from all of the various sites and all of the various people that are polled, the numbers then become significant in, it's easy now to identify where a particular area is of interest or problem or that needs to be addressed. So those surveys are supposed to be drafted, and we're going to be finalizing those in their draft form within the next week. The other thing that's going to happen is that my office and the business division is going to be sending out a notification district-wide, as well as to the community, how this process is going to go, and kind of the steps to anticipate over the next period of time. You know, these are, you know, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, phase 4, and these are the various milestones of activities that will occur. The other thing that we accomplished today is that we went through and we made the decision that they're going to attack the district according to attendance area. And they will, of course, prioritize, you know, elementary school, middle school, high school, and group them accordingly. So that type of work is the work that we've been doing over the last 2 weeks. And so even though it doesn't sound like much, it's actually pretty significant based on the size and bandwidth that you know, we're working at in the remote environment that we're in. The other thing that is going to happen, we are going to be soliciting participation from the community as well as staff to be part of the advisory slash, and prioritization is the wrong word to use because that's not something we're going to do, but to have people who want to participate in the process of once the data is gathered, that it then is evaluated, and we then talk about vision and future focus and scope of what work wants to go on with regard to whatever's found in this master plan. So, and in the meantime, while all of these sort of multiple steps are going on, there will be a presentation made to the board to update them as well and get their input and direction as to, you know, what they want us to do at the various milestones that once we establish what that schedule is. So that's kind of where we are, but the goal is to have all of the sites surveyed and gathered information validated and updated in its draft form no later than the end of this summer. So, and we're crossing our fingers that, you know, everybody is able to move freely, you know, by the end of the summer, but we'll see how that goes. But the interviews will be done remotely via Zoom or Google Meet. And then the site visits will be scheduled and coordinated so that there's minimal impact to people who are on site, as well as the evaluation team can maintain social distancing and safety. So, but that's the latest on the long range facilities master plan and where we are with that.
And Kelly, is there, so I know you mentioned that you would end up getting board direction on the decisions that would be made at certain junctions of the larger project, but is there like a Gantt chart or something that like will at least outline the timing in a visual manner to members of this committee?
Actually, that is something that we worked on today. So as soon as that document is completed, I will be more than happy to share that with you guys.
Okay, so then in rough, like just to go over timing, thank you for that overview. So, and again, if you could start back as well, like, so we picked the advisors around when you've started doing what work, and then you expect to do what work. And sorry, I must have missed the point about what was expected to be done by the summer.
Just the overall survey of all 43 sites and gathering of the existing conditions and validating and updating the physical condition of the spaces, either through video, photograph, destructive testing or investigative testing of, you know, materials and sites, and that is going to take a little bit longer than we anticipated because we still have to adhere to the the requirements of social distancing, and then we have limited access because we have limited staff on sites. So that's where the time impact was a little bit extended than more than what we had anticipated. But I'm just going to pull up this little thing here. So let's see. So for the tentative schedule, so we're going to complete the questionnaire and draft. And that is going to be done within the next 2 weeks. And that will be posted and available on a Google Drive for everyone to access. So that will happen within the next 2 weeks. So that means that'll happen within the month of February. The site surveys are being scheduled now. And I believe when we did a count on the calendar, the goal is for them to do like 2 sites per week. And that would be to physically go to the sites, document the conditions, do their, reporting and documenting of those conditions, and then, stick it in the database for it to be reviewed later. Then they are going to, remember I stated that they would be sending out the surveys. Well, their goal is to have people respond to those surveys within a 3-week period of time. And after those surveys are received, then they're planning on taking between 1 to 2 weeks to analyze that information and come up with a high-level report for us to know what the outcomes were from those surveys. So, and that is scheduled for mid to late March for that to happen. And then the site profiles that they are working on, those are expected, if we stay on schedule with the 2 sites per week, they expect to have those reports and updates ready for us to review sometime in early mid to late May or early June. And then the final report, if we can kind of keep pace with what they've got and there's no additional information, drastic information that changes, they want to be able to finish their draft by the end of the summer, early September, to present to us what the update would be. So that is the very high level milestone schedule that we discussed today. And so we, as I said, discussed it and reviewed it, kind of fine tuned it, went through some different things, and they are now going to prepare a document for us that we then can be able to share with you all as to what the plan is, the plan of the plan, so to speak.
And before I go to Lisa.
Yes.
Sorry, forgot which one I was supposed to unmute. Before I go to Lisa, by report at the end of the summer, do you mean the actual plan update?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Lisa?
So I wanted to step back a little bit since this is new to me. So I assume we have a master plan and that need to be updated every 5 years, 10 years. Is that what we're doing? And
Yes.
then I was curious to know, what is the scope of services that they're working under? Basically, what are the things that we have asked them, whoever is doing these updates or surveys, to look for? So for example, are we looking for asbestos? Are we looking for lead piping? Are we looking for ventilation issues? Are we looking for those sorts of deficiencies? And is there like a guiding document that asks some minimum things that we need them to look? Because I'd be curious to look at that scope of service to see what are the particular things they're focusing on that they are looking for.
So I'll be happy to share what their scope of work is, the document, the actual document itself. So when we do our facilities assessments, the Department of Education and the Office of Public School Construction, they have a checklist and a ranking sheet that they provide to the school districts based on whether you're a K-12, a community college, or a university across the state. So, you're categorized based on the type of structure. And within that, you also have your breakdown of elementary, middle school, junior high, high school. And then there's a category for special ed and, daycares and things like that. So there's all these different classifications. Those scorecards or checklists that they provide have categories that are what I call fire life safety issues. So if it is affected by fire or impacted by fire, it's in a classification. If it affects life in terms of the health and well-being and safety of the individuals who occupy the building, whether inside or out, it's categorized and put on that list. And then the things that you mentioned, those are all compliance and regulatory related items. And so we have a minimum that we have to adhere to at the state level, that even though maybe the County of Alameda says, hey, all schools have to have, only 2% lead piping, the state of California is what we have to abide by in terms of our facilities and structures. And so their standards are dictated by the Division of State Architect. And so they have a much higher rigid standard that they expect us to perform to. So yes, we are going to look at all facilities related items in terms of how the buildings operate and function. We're looking at all contaminants. It's my understanding that that was done in the last survey, and anything that was identified that fell outside of the norm has been addressed or in the process of being addressed. So I don't believe that there is you should not have fear that your students are in facilities that are dangerous because there are contaminants that are still present there. I know that we did remove all the lead piping and all the water fountains have been updated. And I mean, all of those kinds of immediate low-hanging fruit things, I believe that maintenance and operations is either doing it or has already done it at the sites that were determined that they were beyond the scope of being a normal sort of condition. Once that is all done, then the buildings are rated and ranked according to, is this in good condition, poor condition? Is it at the end of its life cycle where, hey, we need to do a full replacement because the full replacement cost exceeds, or modernization costs exceeds the full replacement cost. So maybe we should just go ahead and full replace it. So they have all these different categories. Once those evaluations are done, each one of our sites is going to have a little scorecard. And then we're going to take that and evaluate it and say, hey, all of our buildings that fall in this category, they need to be moved to the top of the list. All of the buildings that fall in this category, they can kind of remain in the middle. And of course, all of our new structures like Horner and Walters and Thornton and Centerville and Hopkins, those are all brand new facilities. So they're going to be at the bottom of the list because they're going to have everything that's new. So I hope that this makes sense to you and I'm not like over explaining the process, but I just wanted to make sure you understood that it's pretty complicated, but pretty simplified in the sense that everything kind of gets categorized based on the fire life safety, and they're very thorough in
I think Kelly cut out, right? All right, I think we have like 5 minutes left in this item. So once Kelly's back, I think she's coming back.
Yeah, she froze.
Okay.
Kelly, can you turn off your video?
Okay. I was going to say, we're trying to be thorough. Okay, I sure will. So we try to be as thorough as possible and address those things. So, but by all means, if you're aware of something now that you want to make sure we address, please feel free to email that to me and I can make sure that the team is made aware of it and they put that on their list to pay attention to.
Thank you. Thank you for the thorough answer.
All right, and yeah, I think we have something like 5 minutes. So moving to Brian.
Thank you. Yeah, no, the scope of services information would be hugely helpful because it's sometimes it's hard to. I think that'll trigger thoughts from us and others on what to consider. But I had some questions around the scope, and I'll list them out.
Okay.
And then you can respond to them. But want to know, are we going to be reviewing and updating the facility standards? You know, for example, are we going to look at better support for distance learning? Restrooms is always an important topic. Do we have our restroom standards clear and well defined? Those are just illustrative examples. I'm sure there's more. And then will this plan include consideration of the demographics and boundaries? The last plan considered that, because in the sense that we were growing, so the plan included building a huge amount of capacity in our middle schools. I think this plan should also address the enrollment decline. And then will it also address potential program changes? You know, obviously immersion programs come to mind, but all-day kindergarten would be something I know that you know, while not adopted, would be something we'd want to think about if it's the direction we want to go for a long range in this district. So I think those are the three scope questions that come to mind that I think would be important to be thought about in this plan and addressed in this plan.
So to answer your question, yes, yes, and yes. They are part of their scope of work, but they're at a very high level and they are not going to be going into a deep dive of that information. But they do have a clause in their contract that if that is something we want them to do a deep dive in, that we have already negotiated a price for that to occur. And we just need to go back to the board and get direction from them to let us know how far and how deep they want us to go into those particular items. But the report is going to touch on all three of these things at a very high level. But of course, when you do that, it does sort of ask other questions and other questions sort of evolve from that. So we will address it based on the limited scope that they do have. And then if you know, you all make a recommendation to go further and I get direction to go further, we will.
But one more quick comment. I think my experience as a board member before, we ended up going with one vendor and being dissatisfied with the results and having to go with a second vendor to get the full plan. So that's part of the reason why I ask about this. And so I think it's good that this can all be happened in the same vendor, and at least is part of the scope in some way.
Well, as I said, we're touching on it at a very high level, but I know the deep dive that you're talking about is something that is an added service. And one of the things that we were very adamant about when we were negotiating with them is that we did identify kind of like what if scenarios. And if you decide to do this, this is what this looks like. And so we have a very clear path to completing these activities to a much deeper level and understanding how much the financial impact would be for us to do it versus having to, oh yeah, we got to go find somebody else now and do the solicitation and wait for them to get the information. So we did do a good job of being proactive and having that identified ahead of time. So.
Thank you.
Robert?
You mentioned you're going to do the surveys, and I missed it a little bit. There are going to be three different surveys for staff and two other groups. Could you repeat that?
So there's going to be staff, the community, and then the operations staff.
Okay,
so,
and that'll be in March?
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
Great, thanks.
And I differentiate between staff because we have our instructional side of the house, and then we have our operational side of the house. And so that's why we're differentiating between those two.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
And given that time has expired, I'll ask if there's any objections to extending for 5 more minutes. Seeing none, Henry?
Thank you. And I just want to say thank you for having the survey for us, because when I talk to the teachers, they don't remember having a survey that they could contribute to the long range facility plans last time. So thank you so much. And so on the so having this survey in March, are there things that we can ask, like we can let the teachers think about it ahead of time? Like many teachers haven't been in the classroom for a year. They have I mean, if is there things that they can actually start thinking about before they fill out the survey? They should probably stop by the classroom and see if there are things that's still not fixed yet.
That's a great idea. I will go ahead and ask them that. But thank you for bringing that to my attention because I hadn't really thought about that. So that's something I definitely will ask them to do. And
Thank
the
you.
other thing is you guys will have like 3 weeks to respond to the survey. So it's not like you have to like immediately do it, but it will ask you very thought-provoking questions. And even though you'll have like a ranking or a range that you can answer the question to, there will be an opportunity for you to like fill in and add more comments, to
Okay.
a particular question. So if there's very specific things, or if you guys have ideas about specific things, you'll have an opportunity to articulate it in those spaces and not just like, A, B, C, D kind of thing.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Mhm.
And Kelly, does the long-range facilities plan also cover outside spaces? The reason I ask this is to the extent we consider a pandemic a one-time event, then maybe we don't look into that. But given that at the beginning of the pandemic, we were interested in potentially going outside for teaching, and if we connect climate change with ongoing pandemics or the possibility of their return, is that something we would want to look at, or is just the risk so remote at this point that we're focusing on the inside of facilities?
Actually, Antonio, as part of, we call it the 21st century learning model. We actually are looking at outside spaces and outside learning spaces. And so I don't know that it's necessarily tied to the pandemic, but one of the things that as part of this new learning model is that you do provide additional transitional spaces that you can, transition your class outside to have an outside lecture, or to have outside space where, kids can do experiments, or have, just have a sort of different change of scenery and a different sort of framework around your classroom. So we are looking at that, and that is something that they are going to be evaluating once again at a very high level, because we as a district, those kinds of decisions are also based around instructional issues and what direction the Office of Instruction decides that they want to go in, where, and it's really up to them to drive that, to say, hey, we're going with this particular model. So now that is going to require us to have these types of spaces. So, but thank you for bringing that up. And I will make sure that we definitely address it and look at it from, a 360 perspective from the pandemic, but as well as looking at, optional learning environments that we should just automatically do because like we're in California, we have the ability to do it, kind of thing. So.
Thank you. And before I go to Lisa, so this is a perfect example of something that this committee can take on and potentially advise the board on. For example, we believe that full day kindergarten merits something more than just a high level overview. Now, granted, given that we don't know what a high level overview versus a deep dive means, we're in no position to do that as of this moment. But we could, continue to look into it over the course of the next few meetings and potentially determine that and advise the board as such. Lisa, I think we have like a minute and a half or something. Go ahead.
Yeah, it should be really quick. Brian's comment sparked some additional thoughts. And I just thought about the adequacy of some of the fields. Like I know that some of the schools don't have like a track, like Irvington High doesn't have a track and field. Proper track and field for running. And also I think the arts programs, just having better auditoriums for concerts and theater and presentations, and as well as the band program, having, more better spaces maybe for bands, especially in light of the pandemic. Band programs have been pretty crippled since you're blowing a lot. And so just kind of thinking about the arts, the visual arts, the expressive arts, and the athletics in trying to, and as well as, I assume you're considering all the hookups for electronic, learning, providing sufficient charging stations and hubs for laptops and things like that, Chromebooks. So just kind of bringing it to the next level so that we can be the best state-of-the-art sort of 21st century school we can be for our children. So just a few more thoughts there.
Thank you. Appreciate that. I will definitely.
All right. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Kelly.
No, I was just going to say I will definitely pass this on to them as points of discussion.
And one point of context, right? We identified $1.6 billion of need, and ultimately went out with a $650 million bond. So even at the time, we were not able to meet the needs of our students slash like stakeholders. So we just need to be aware of that, and so priorities will need to be made, and it's up to us to kind of advise on those priorities, both as a committee and just as stakeholders and community members. So I am looking forward to this next topic, community outreach guidelines. I'll hand it over to Kelly and Brian. After some of the feedback, that was discussed at the last meeting about reaching out to the community for the Measure I project, I figured, especially given our scope when it comes to facilities, what perhaps like we're in a good position to give feedback on maybe the floor. What are the minimum standards of outreach that we should be giving to our community when a facility is potentially up for sale or things of that nature. So first I'll hand it back because I know that there was feedback at the last meeting, and I also know that staff then acted on that feedback. So why don't we start first with what we ended up doing for the Marshall site, and then we can start discussing and potentially putting into a document, just some basic bullets of what we think would be a good floor or a set of minimum standards for outreach to the community.
So I'm going to defer to Brian on this because he is our principal information officer for the district and has more information in terms of what tools we have available to do the outreach that you're speaking about.
Sure. Well, there's a variety of different avenues we can to promote different events. The ones I typically use most often, the district website is always a valuable tool, depending on the type and scope of events. Press releases, media releases, media advisories. Those are good for letting the community know events that are happening, trying to get the media's interest as well if it's something that might be of interest to them to cover. Using the Tri-City Voice, the Fremont Argus, in some cases, depending on the scope of the event, moving into the East Bay Times and San Jose Mercury News media groups are always options. We have I feel a very strong social media footprint in the Bay Area with our Facebook page. We have over 9,000 followers on that. So any posts on there, I feel, reaches a good chunk of the community. Our Twitter page currently has 3,700 followers. So again, any posts on social media reach upward of 12,000 people directly, and then probably several thousand more just indirectly. We do have a parent notification system with Bright Arrow that we use that sends emails, phone calls, texts to all our families, which is a very complete way of reaching everyone at one time. Typically, was used primarily for emergency notifications, but as we've kind of figured out the value of it for other means, we've been branching out a little bit more for other types of communications, such as the Marshall site, the Measure E community updates that we've been having over the past couple of weeks. We'll be doing some budget town hall forums later in the month that we'll be putting on there as well. So it's just a good tool to kind of reach everyone at once. We also have Peach Jar, which is our e-flyer distribution service. Instead of sending out hundreds and thousands of paper copies of flyers, we instead upload it onto Peach Jar and send an e-copy in one blast, saving a lot of paper and sending emails rather than flyers and backpacks. So it's a number of different ways with this particular forum with the Marshall site. Once the meeting was established, I've sent out 2 Bright Arrow messages. One is kind of an announcement of the event. Another one went out today reminding everyone about it. We've done a couple rounds of social media posts to remind people of the events. It's been posted on the website since the meeting was announced. I also sent a notice out to the Tri-City Voice. I don't believe they posted it. That's always kind of hit or miss, just depending on the space they have and their publishing deadlines, whether you can get something in, but it was sent out to them as well as another way to get notice out to the community. So there's a variety of different avenues. With these events, I typically go on at least a 2-week window to start promotion, more if possible, just to kind of make sure that it stays on people's radar for amount of time. I usually do a general announcement, follow it up with some reminders on different forums, and then kind of stay in contact with Kelly or whatever department is hosting the meeting just to make sure that they feel the word is out there. And if there needs to be any other reminders put out or any other avenues to try and reach some audiences if they don't feel the turnout is what they want it to be. So those are the kind of different avenues I use posting different district events. I'm working with department heads in all different district departments, always trying to keep in contact with them and communicating them of what they have coming up, what they feel needs to be promoted, and what are the best ways to reach the audience that they're trying to reach. So that's the strategy in a nutshell. It's different for every event, but that's kind of the general formulas we use.
So I know at the last meeting, we talked about physical banners, specifically within our scope of facilities, right? We won't be talking about just general events. I think those we defer completely to you. But when it comes to potential sale of facilities, like either on-site banners, I think was one point of discussion. What goes into deciding for or against that?
So just to give you guys an update, we did put 2 banners out at the Marshall site. Sharon, and thank you, Sharon, for taking that on and working with Tom to get that done. And Tom Ekman, our head of grounds and maintenance, they were out, I believe, last Tuesday. It was Tuesday or Thursday in all that rain, putting those banners up on the fence and making sure that they were posted in both directions. So whether you're coming from the north, or I guess it's the east or the west, you will see the sign notifying folks of the meeting that will be happening tomorrow evening. So, and then of course at the district office, there is on the bulletin board a little notification so that when people are at the district office, they can always look at that and see what events are coming. But Brian covered most of all of the things that were actually done for this particular 7-11 committee meeting, as well as for the Measure E projects update that I referred to earlier.
And one follow-up question is, I assume we don't have access to Nixle or something like that, right? That would be given to other government agencies, but not the school district?
Fremont PD is the only agency I know of that utilizes Nixle. And yeah, I've worked with my counterpart over there for messaging, but that's typically for emergency situations. I don't know how far they go out as far as promoting other types of events, but I can certainly ask about that.
And then presence on, especially when it comes to, I think one of the points of feedback was the sale of a facility doesn't just have to do with, parents / students, right? But also just wider community members. So would posts, like, I assume we have no, just based on the lack of mention, we have no presence on Nextdoor or more local based social media. Have we explored that? What goes against that? Has there been a judgment call on that social media platform?
We have attempted to set up accounts on Nextdoor. They are not set up to work with school districts, which is something a lot of my peers working for other districts have been frustrated with, that they haven't been able to reach their communities through that venue. So that's something we'll continue to work on. I have partnered with the city of Fremont on some different projects as far as acquiring mailing lists for different neighborhoods for targeted messaging. And that's certainly an option as well down the road.
So I'd definitely like to open it up to the wider group. So one example of where a subcommittee can potentially be of value is they can provide us a proposal for a meeting, so that we're not having to create something. Generally committee meetings aren't effective when they become workshops. And so that work is done, outside of the meeting. And that option is still available, but so in terms of minimum standards for community outreach, just want to open it up to the wider committee for further discussion. Lisa?
So I was actually very pleased that the feedback I gave last time was taken into consideration. I have gotten several reminders via email from different venues. I don't know if they're reaching folks that are not parents or seniors, but the banners on the fence were certainly noticed. Like all my neighbors noticed the banners. So I can say for sure that when the banner went up, I started getting texts and pictures texted to me by the neighbors. So I think that's effective. Also, I think I posted it on Nextdoor. I do know that Nextdoor is a difficult platform. I think you have to almost have different people that live in different neighborhoods sign up. And so it's not really possible for a district to do that. And I think that the website has a form to provide feedback ahead of the meeting. And I think that's also very useful, because community members that may not be able to attend can at least provide feedback ahead of time. So leaflets or direct mailing for a certain radius might be something to consider still. But thank you for the improvement.
Liz?
Antonio, I'd just like to respond to her comment.
Oh, sure.
We actually did look into the mailers, and I did present it to, my administrative team, and a decision was made not to do the mailers because the expense associated with them was very high. And since the district currently is in a budgetary constraint, they felt that it really wasn't an appropriate expenditure for us to consider. And so we ended up not doing it just for that fact. But I just wanted to let you know that I did follow through on that, and we did really dive really deep to figure out how to do it. But, in the end, the decision was made. It just was not cost effective for us as a district to do it just for one meeting. So maybe in the future, when our financial situation changes, maybe we can consider that again. But I just wanted to share that with you.
Thank you. It makes sense.
Liz?
Yes, I just wanted to mention, as Brian had said, he prefers to have a good 2 weeks to build up some various avenues of reaching the community and families. And I would say too that people should have a certain amount of notice, that allows them to plan and to be able to attend a meeting. So for committees like ours or others, where we know that part of what we need to do is gather community input, we should make it our first priority to get that business underway from the get-go, so that there's adequate time for people to give input.
Got it. Thank you. Okay, seeing no one else in queue, I think we'll just go ahead and take this as feedback for that particular project, but not as of this time set any minimum standards or recommendations. But yeah, these are all great ideas that the district can pull on and make judgment calls based on the specific circumstances of the event and or project. So having completed that item, we're on thoughts on future meeting topics. So I've started to get into the practice of just listing what I know is going to be a future meeting project on this item. So we had talked about bringing back air quality. That may be, asking our M&O team to step back into the meetings and present on this. We had a presentation on this, I believe, in November or October. And so we can certainly reference that material, and I would encourage this group to do so. This would cover both COVID and the fire season. And then the demographers report, as Kelly noted, we did get an updated report. It's a very fulsome report, and there was a presentation and a discussion that was made to the board, but nevertheless, that is very important information for us to go over. So I would ask us as essentially homework to at least review the presentation that the demographers gave, whether it's the video of the presentation to the board and subsequent discussion, or simply the PowerPoint. And then the City of Fremont development projects, as Kelly noted, we had planned to have it this meeting, it fell through. And so we're going to ask them to come back next meeting. To the extent we cover those three topics in the next meeting, that'll be a pretty fulsome agenda. The other point I would note is, and I think of something of value to this group, would be potentially reviewing the safety plan that just came out, this week from a facilities perspective. So for our review, if that's something that's of interest to this committee. I think potentially I could schedule, some minor amounts of time to at least preview it. But I know that was the starts of a discussion earlier on in the meeting. So that would be a more appropriate place to potentially discuss that, again, though, from a facilities perspective, so within the scope of our committee. Outside of that, do I have any hands? Otherwise, I think these are kind of holdovers from prior meetings, so I would imagine they take some priority. Brian and then Cecily.
Not sure when it'll come, but the long range facilities master plan update process, I'm sure we'll want something along those lines, probably coinciding with the update that's going to the board. I don't know if we want, before or after that update, but that seems likely something we may want to review. And perhaps comment on.
Got it. Cecily?
The demographer stuff to review, would someone mind sending out a link for that? I am not immediately familiar where to find it. Second thing, as far as the ventilation in the buildings, before joining the board, this committee, I listened to the meetings from this school year, and I just don't recall anything that's really very specific about COVID in terms of ventilation. So it would be helpful if we have a sort of presentation again to have maybe more specific COVID related talk. I think that there was some conjecture and some thoughts about how it could relate to it, but I just don't feel like there was too much specific as far as that goes.
Yeah, so
I don't know if that's possible.
Yeah, so two quick things. So that point that you're making, I think, would fall within air quality. I was talking about an October or November meeting of this committee where we invited M&O to come, which should be posted. But nevertheless, I think it's due for return. On sending out the demographer's report, I think Kelly's going to send out a visual timeline for the long-range facilities plan. So I think that'd be a great place to put the demographers report or a link to it. And then I'll go to Henry and then William.
Okay, thank you. I'm about to send a survey to our staff, to our teachers, to let just to ask, are there any ventilation issues that they are still seeing in the classrooms, and then I can bring it to share with all of you at the next meeting. But I was just want to see, is something that would you like me to share the result with you ahead of time, so at time to look at, or is it something that has to be looked at during the meeting?
Please, if you can target sending it to me before we send out the agenda, so probably in the week prior.
Okay, all right. I have one more question. I know that the solar installation, the presentations go to the board next week. Is that going to be is the board going to make a decision at that time, or if not, should this be some future topic that we should come back and talk about also?
I think let's make that potential proposal for a future meeting topic contingent on what happens at the board meeting.
Okay, sounds good.
And William?
Thank you. I don't know if this is going to fall under the safety report you're referring to, but over the next few months, should this committee anticipate any engagement with regard to the district reopening for on-campus instruction? As you know, of course, we're monitoring vaccinations, and as things change with the pandemic, does the facility committee anticipate being engaged from the board, the superintendent, with regard to a plan for reopening? Is that something we should start thinking about now?
Yeah, so the safety plan that I'm referring to is about reopening. Sorry, so your comment begs that I should have given it more context, but I didn't want to go into a wider discussion. But just for context, the safety plan is the underlying plan of reopening schools. And just for further context to people who weren't on the committee before, during last summer, there were a variety of there was a task force on reopening and sub-task forces. And I served as liaison to the sub-task force covering facilities. So I know there's quite a bit of material that within a return to campuses from a facilities perspective. So there's definitely items that I think would be within our purview. So yes, that would be what I had in mind with it.
Okay, thank you.
And thank you. And so for people who in the chat, Brian has posted, despite my warnings to not use the chat, I do appreciate that he posted both the demographers report and the safety plan. But Kelly will send it out probably this week or next to us. Thank you, everybody, and we can adjourn the meeting. Have a good night.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.